This episode of the e-commerce playbook is brought to you by Omnisend, the top-rated email and SMS marketing platform for online merchants. With Omnisend, setting up e-commerce automations is so simple you'll have them up and running before you finish your morning coffee. Plus, you can segment your customers based on their shopping habits and even dive into SMS or push notifications, all from one seamless dashboard. Omnisend isn't just another marketing tool, it's the secret weapon behind over 100,000 successful e-commerce brands. Whether it's crafting eye-catching emails or sending out timely texts, Omnisend helps you connect with your customers like never before. So don't wait. Your best campaigns are just a click away. Go to www.omnisend.com and start today.
Welcome back to another episode of the e-commerce playbook podcast. My voice is a little faded and rough from all the shouting I did at the Texas football game this weekend, masquerading as a Texas fan, but I'll do my best to get through this. I'm also just in a bad mood. I'm warning you all as you listen right now because I'm confused by the information and I don't like feeling that way. So hopefully these three gentlemen can help me solve it. This is the brain trust of the DTCCI, the Direct to Consumer Confidence Index. And they are here to help us sort out what is going on in the macro e-commerce environment. Gentlemen, pleasure to have you all back. I'll let you introduce yourselves, starting with our positive force, the person who's here to bring hope and optimism for the group. Jeremiah, how are you and who are you? Can you do a quick intro?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm sad I didn't get to go to that game with you all because that would have been a blast. But yeah, I'm Jeremiah, founder, CEO of NoCommerce, and we run surveys across getting close to 5,000 brands and collect a lot of interesting data. The big thing we'll be focusing on today is just some of the information we have about gifting patterns heading into Q4 and talking a little bit about some of what we're seeing in political spending and some of that.
And then next, I'll have our less optimistic, but more emotionless. He's just a man of the numbers. He just tells you how it is. Yarden, who are you and how are you doing?
And that comes down to be our Steve for everyone is wearing. So
No way. Steve has more personality injected into the numbers. You're neutral. You're just numbers guy.
yeah, I'm a co-founder and CEO of Varos. We provide benchmarking and market trends for D2C e-commerce businesses. We track about 7,000 companies that are sharing data on Varos. It's all first-party, anonymized data from revenue from Shopify, Meta, Google, TikTok, GA4, and so forth. And that's where we're pulling this data to help you guys out.
All right. And last but not least, the man whose job it is to weave the narrative into the data like he could weave a braid into those luscious locks, Mr. Steve Recook. Who are you and what's up, man?
Thank you, Taylor. I'm Steve Recook, Director of Data at Common Thread Collective. Build a lot of the models, and I'm staring at a lot of the direct-to-consumer confidence index data that Jeremiah from NoCommerce provides.
Awesome. Well, my intro was sort of off the back of our pre-production call here, where we're trying to sort through, as we always do, the glimpse into the data. So our process involves gathering all of the contextual data from the previous period. We get together on a call and we work through the interpretation of the information that we're seeing. And in August, you may remember, if you listened to the last episode, we talked about a beginning of a trend that was potentially a canary in the coal mine, which was the declining growth of seven-figure stores in particular, and a sequence of about 5 consecutive months where we had seen seven-figure stores declining in year-over-year growth percentage. Now, why that tends to be a little bit more concerning is that seven-figure stores depend on new customer acquisition as their source of growth, where 8-figure stores can often hide the fact that they may not be growing as fast because of how much existing customer revenue growth they benefit from the previous year's investment. So they tend to be a slower indication, whereas the seven-figure stores can be a little bit more of a pulse on the present state of new customer acquisition, which usually is the best predictor of future value. So that's kind of when we see this, what we're sort of setting up. So Yarden, with that, why don't you tell the people what we saw in September as it relates to those kinds of numbers?
Yeah, so we saw in September what we were worried was going to keep happening. So as Taylor mentioned, I mean, we had a peak in May, but we're just talking right now for seven-figure brands. Typically, we had a peak in May of over 40% year-over-year revenue growth. And since then, it's been a different story. Second half of 2024 has been riddled with, slower revenue growth than we're used to seeing in the first half, all the way down to just turning negative year over year in September, minus 0.4%. So basically flat, but in the red by a little bit. It's interesting because the larger brand, 8, 9 figure brands who are usually seeing less year over year revenue growth than the smaller brand have actually turned that trend, and they're up 10% year over year, which is still slower than also they were used to seeing in the first half. But yeah, soft month all around, unfortunately. And especially for the smaller brands that don't have the luxury of the big customer base, and the extra budget to make things happen.
So we're working through a few theories in our heads right now, and we're going to sort of let you know that the next set of conversations are going to be that. They're going to be theories informed by some information and data. So the first theory we want to talk about is a continued topic that is very popular, which is related to political spending and advertising. Jeremiah, I know you were just diving deep into some of the things that we have there, where theory one may be that attention, as well as attention is being drawn into the cultural debate around a very highly contested presidential election, as well as a bunch of local elections. I'll tell you this, my kids know who Dave Min and Scott Baugh are right now more than they know who any advertising brand is. And that's the two congressmen in our local jurisdiction that are running in and just pelting them with YouTube ads. So they can recite their taglines by heart as a running joke in our house. So that is certainly at play in this environment. So Jeremiah, tell us a little bit about what we're seeing there and then how that may be contributing to some softer performance.
Yeah. And so what we see for September, and there's going to be a little bit more data too that we'll share in the report, but for September, we're seeing $270 million in ad spend from the Harris campaign and 78 million in ad spend from the Trump campaign. So those are the reported numbers by the campaigns. It is a lot of money. Obviously, that's $350 million basically between those two campaigns. And even more than that is spent by PACs. And so one of the things that we may be seeing is that there's some amount of impacts from the ad spend on September's performance. One thing that's really important to note, though, is that most of the political ad spend actually goes to TV. And in this context, really what we're looking at, we've got the revenue numbers, obviously, for 7 and 8 figure brands. But also when we're looking at ad spend data, we're looking at TikTok, Meta, and Google. And so those channels are not getting as high a percentage of that spend. So one of the things we're going to be diving into a little bit more is where do we see some of that spend coming? There's a little bit of data to indicate that there's still a pretty massive amount of dollars having been spent throughout the cycle on those platforms, but most of this is going to be TV. So there's a real question there of how much impact does that have? And then the secondary question there as well is, even if these dollars are not being spent in their entirety on Meta and Google specifically, is there still an attention component that's having an impact on revenue? And I think that that's hard to quantify, but it is likely that there's some impact there, even if the dollars are not being spent.
I can take a stab at quantifying it in the sense that we saw big conversion rate drops in September. So just to, put some numbers around it, in August, year-over-year conversion rate was down 1%. And in September, it was down 9%, which has huge impact. So people are just buying less.
Do you sell stuff online? If you do, you need Omnisend. Yes, that Omnisend, the powerful yet refreshingly intuitive email and SMS tool that helps you make $73 for every dollar spent. The one that's so good, it's almost boring. Like watching steady lines go up and up and up. Just automate your email and SMS campaigns with Omnisend, set it up once, then sit back and watch the sales roll in while you snooze. Oh, are you still awake? Then give Omnisend a try and start getting sales so steady they'll definitely put you to sleep. Just go to www.omnisend.com or click the first link in the show notes.
So that brings us to, Steve, let me set you up here for where
Mhm.
I think we're going to go next, which is, okay, so we know there's political spending competition, but we also see this declining conversion rate. And we know that there's been this sort of year-long growing trend around increasing in discounts, preference for value. And we also have some data around customers saying they're planning to shop more later. So this theory I'm kind of referring to as like the saver and the value maximizer, which is just that maybe they're pending up and with a little bit more conscious towards value and looking to maximize the maximum discount that they're going to get here in the coming future. But what are you seeing around that idea in terms of what may be contributing to the present softness?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And that might be why we're seeing kind of what Yarden's expressing as like window shopping, basically. A lot of people go into your website looking at your products, but not converting. And they're looking because there is an increase that we've seen, same as last year in the DTCCI data, of I plan to spend more in the future. That number started ticking up in August, just like it did in 2023. And we've kind of seen it follow the same trend where like I plan to spend more in the future. And the political atmosphere might even contribute more to that, where people are just, I'm going to spend more when the time is right.
So that's a hopeful view right there, is that we've got a couple of things. The other thing I just want to remind us back to is that we know that we're entering now October 21st, the final stretch before the election here. And so we know that this is really the period where this becomes acute. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're sitting here in November talking about a similar set of data. But the hope is, and what we've seen is that the transfer of the lack of attention in early November does get made up for in the back half of November. So I think we're
Yeah, but
putting a
not to
lot
be
of,
the negative guy, but I'll still say that I am not convinced. Maybe this group is more convinced than I am that it's all political. Because again, since May we see consistent slowdown and significantly ramping up since July. And so, yeah, it's a few weeks before the election. Now it's the worst that it's been, but I would bet that it's a variable, but not the whole story.
all right, agent provocateur, I accept the challenge, but now there's an obligation on you then to insert corresponding substitute theory. So then what would you attribute the consecutive decline to? This is an unedited blank pause. We're just gonna sit in it together. Go ahead.
I think my best guess is that people have bought throughout the year. There's been a lot of, e-com is constantly making every holiday a bigger deal than it usually is. There's new, special days like a Prime Day and a bunch of equivalents to that. And people have bought what they need. And now they're waiting for the holiday season. We're a few weeks away. And I do have hope for Black Friday, Cyber Monday this year, because it could be that the slowness in the past few months is, I'm going to wait until the holidays. Last year, while last year in this part was a good year over year period, like October was 30% year over year revenue growth of 23 versus 22. Black Friday, Cyber Monday was 60% year over year revenue growth, which means that more and more people are focusing on the holidays and putting more consumer spend towards that. So it's a whole, but I don't have the magic ball. I don't have all the answers.
One thing, so if we have the political theory, we have the spender saver theory. One thing I'll continue to insert is what I call the movement to profit theory, which is that my anecdotal experience of my subset of customers is that top line revenue growth is no longer the expectation or standard for a presently redesigned business strategy. And that's that brands have sort of let go of comping to an era when they were trying to drive non-profitable revenue. And they're having to almost reset the baseline of expectation of growth into the future with this year. This year is about no longer a previous comp, but this is the new foundation, because the question of what does our business look like from a revenue standpoint when every dollar has to be profitable creates a new expectation of growth. And the goal then is to go out next year and comp against this new thing that they've created. And I say that for some really big businesses. Like as we've moved upstream as an agency, we work with some of the largest stores on Shopify. And I can tell you that this is the reality for a lot of them, that there is a era where they came out of colossal growth in the COVID era and now are resetting after coming off of many years, or maybe the last year and a half down to a year over year comp, and are now saying, okay, what does it look like to demand profitable new customer acquisition, to figure out how we can build this business towards the bottom line, and to reset for future growth into next year against that? Because there's been too many months in a row of not acquiring them year over year more new customers because the efficiency demands changed, that they're in that. And I still think as an industry, that era is on us. So I wouldn't be surprised to see us comp flat at some point, or comp negative more broadly as we go through that sort of final last grasp of reset for a lot of really big stores.
Yeah.
Taylor, do you think it's a spiral? Like, do you think that, let's say, July going from up 20 to August up 10 or up 12, whatever it was, like, do you think that is, less money in the bank in this new world to then put towards revenue growth, and this sort of keeps going until someone infuses more cash or someone changes the way it's done?
At some point, you have to invert the decline in new customer acquisition. You have to. Otherwise, there's a lagging decline in returning customer revenue that just follows. And that usually that influx is an increase in investment somewhere. Like, either you have to solve new customer acquisition in this really dynamic way, or you have to say, okay, we're going to take a short-term hit to profitability to get to growth again. That has to occur. And brands are struggling in that valley, and a lot of them have gotten lean. And so they're like short-term profitable, they're making money, but they haven't inverted the curve yet to where, so it is a little bit of a spiraling effect until you get to a point where you create that inflection point and start growing again. And so that is a little bit of my concern when I see the 7 figures sort of, that's to me my leading indicator of new customer acquisition. And I'm like, ooh, if we don't see new customer revenue growth happen again, we're going to have a lagging returning customer revenue problem that's going to show up in Q4. And that's what I get concerned about.
One of the things I wanted to touch on too, we were talking before this a little bit about the year over year numbers and timing and some of the things that have happened in the market over the last couple of years. And I think that's something that's interesting here as well. So at the beginning of the year, 2024, we saw really good year over year numbers, but is that in part because of the fact that 2023 was so bad? Beginning of 2023. And so I think like that's another factor here. And so one of the things I just wanted to touch on is that piece. And if you look at, there's this Fred chart, the Federal Reserve, I think it's St. Louis Federal Reserve. But anyway, there's this chart that I'm sure everybody's seen that's been floating around for years that looks at e-commerce retail sales as a percentage of total sales. And so we peaked in Q2 of 2020 at 16.4% of total sales being e-commerce. And then that slowly dropped until Q2 2022 was the bottom of that since 2020 at 14.2%. And we're now back up as of Q2 2024, we're back up to 16%. So almost back to that number from 2020. I think that's an interesting factor here. And then the other thing is the stock market hit its low in June of 2022 as well. And I know like every business is different, but in my business, mid 2022 things started to get challenging, right? And I think like we started to see challenges in our customer base, which ultimately it ends up being challenges in our business as well. And growth and stuff has been fine, but at the end of the day, like it's just harder. The back half was so bad into early 2023 that I think that's probably also coloring what we see here a little bit. And I think Yarden, you had a little bit of data in terms of what the difference was between 2023 and 2022 for September. Looking at the difference there, what was the increase from 2022 to 2023 for September?
43%.
43%. Yeah. So there was like 43% increase year over year from 22 to 23, and then basically flat from 23 to 24.
So that's not good. This is what I'm like. So what does that mean for November, December? right? Like
Yeah,
what do
well,
we?
that's what I don't know, but like it's an interesting thing, right? Like it's still up in theory, it's up 40% from 2022, but it's not up year over year. So I don't know like what that means for this year versus last year Black Friday sales.
Yeah, what I'm afraid of is that yeah, I don't. It just how do we think about November and December as it relates to this? Well, there's so many pieces of that I think a lot of people depend on this moment, and unfortunately, it's one of those things. And I think we have done some data on this previously, but the November and December realization is a byproduct of all the work done up to this moment. In many cases, like it's really hard to like the hay is sort of in the barn as it relates to how many customers you've acquired, how much demand you've created, how much you've filled your funnel up until this moment, so to speak. And so it becomes really hard to suddenly go out and recomp out against the previous month. Like, I wonder if we looked at Yarden like September, October, November, December as a percentage by year and see how much September and October predicted November and December. Like, and see
Yeah.
Yeah.
if those things were related to each other in some way.
A couple of things is like, I'll say again, because I think it's important. Like last year, while last year was up, the holidays were up order of magnitude more year over year than, September, October were, like in the months that we're discussing. So the holidays did perform a lot better than the couple months before. Devil's advocate is that the couple months before were still positive. The other thing I'll say is that in the report that we wrote for this month, we get really specific into the days of when revenue starts going up, when discount rates start going up. We split it by repeat revenue and new customer revenue and total revenue. And there's really different trends in the sense of when do your existing customers buy throughout November, for the discounting and the early discounting you do, and when do new customers buy? And, it should affect your strategy. And now more than ever, you should be into that data as well and knowing when to go in. So really suggest reading that.
Yeah. Since I've been labeled the optimist on this call, I will say there's a couple of things I'm optimistic about. One is what Yarden just said. There was a bigger increase in November versus October last year. We're actually seeing when we survey people about their view of the economy, people are more positive this year than they were last year. And then third thing, political ad spend will be ending here in about 2 weeks. And then the last thing that I'm optimistic about is the fact that we're seeing the same increase in rate of people saying that they expect to spend in the future compared to last year. That's almost exactly the same. That chart, if you look at it, looks exactly the same as it did last year. So those things, I think, I'm not saying it's going to be a gangbuster year because I don't believe that, but I do think there are signs for optimism that I'm going to be kind of holding on to here.
Yeah, it feels like too, there's like, we haven't sort of contextually mentioned any of the war related items that are going on. And it feels like November could be such a dramatic thing where either we come out of an election and there's like consensus around the outcome, we've moved on, and there's sort of this like positive energy towards a different future, or there's like just ongoing contention, there's escalation on the global front. Like it just does feel like a ton of variables staring into it. And so I was hoping to have this underlying like trend of like, well, people are still buying lots of things, it's growing, but now we're adding a third dynamic, which is uncertainty of consistent repeated decline into that pot. And so I just like go back to it. I just feel worried. Steve, you've been doing a lot of forecasting, a lot of modeling for a lot of people. Is anything jumping out in that process that gives you any sense of how you're feeling about November and December?
Well, certainly having Cyber Monday in December shifted some of the forecasts that we've seen for brands. So I don't necessarily expect November to reflect all this kind of future anticipated spending by consumers. Some of that is actually going to occur in December in a more compressed holiday period. I mean, I'm certainly thinking that the spender versus saver data that we saw in the DTCCI data is also positive. We've seen people kind of identifying a little bit more as spenders in August, September, and even the beginning of October now. So that's kind of positive relative to last year. And a better view of the economy is great, as well as, same level of anticipated future spending. So those are all kind of positive. I think the thing that might suffer that you're really pointing toward from our modeling is new customers that you acquire in September and October are your best returning customers in November. And those 7-figure brands are going to be missing that returning customer revenue from those customers that weren't acquired.
Yeah, exactly. You get your highest cohort lift usually in that 30 to 60 day window subsequently after. So because when that falls into a peak moment like that, you're going to sort of reap additional benefit off those groups. So something to definitely consider as we go through it. Well, all right. What else? Anything else? We won't get to meet again before most likely people experience Black Friday, Cyber Monday. I'm guessing we're going to try and turn this around and tighten the schedule up. So maybe I think we should try and do an immediate post-election view, maybe the first week or second week of November to give you guys. So I take that back. We're going to try and turn that around. We've got some new team members here at the D2C Index to help us with this. So we could get it turned around. But anything else as we head into the last few weeks of October, y'all, that you want to share as we look back on September? Google still sucks, if you guys want to know that. Nope. All right. Nothing. That's it. That's a wrap. It's a mixed world. We hope you all enjoy the next few weeks here. We hope we all get safe and through this next couple weeks, which are going to be a bit tumultuous. And then hopefully from there, we can open it up into an exciting last holiday season. So appreciate you all listening. As always, go to d2cindex.com to sign up for the newsletter where we're going to go into depth on all the topics that we discovered today, as well as all the corresponding charts, graphs, and insight that you all want to use to help build those Q4 decks, to help make a case to your board about why you are not crushing it relative to the world around you and everything that you need as a resource. We're here for you. We also, as an additional reminder, one of the things that we do monthly with the subscribers is a Q&A, live in person, to be able to talk through. We open up our data, we go through it, we allow members to ask specific questions, and those conversations have been really cool. And it's an opportunity for people to get really selfish and get answers to their very specific questions about their very specific brands. So come join us, d2cindex.com, sign up, and you will get the chance to get the full library of previous editions, as well as the most recent September edition, and access to those monthly calls. Gentlemen, as always, appreciate you being here. Talk soon.